To say Disney have been inconsistent since taking over Star Wars is a bit of an understatement. I'll be the first to say there's some highs, like there's some stuff that Disney have put out which is very, very solid. But at the same time, some of the stuff they've put out is, I don't really have a word for it, whilst trying to keep it PG. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Star Wars Archives. Today I'm trying something a little bit different. I'm going for a tier list of all the Star Wars projects that Disney have put out since taking over, minus Star Wars Visions, I believe. I'm going to try to do this all in one take and not really edit it too much and just kind of talk about my thoughts as I go along with it. As you can see, I believe the list has basically everything they've put out, minus Star Wars Visions. The animated shows on there being Rebels, Resistance, and the Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire, have all basically just been put as one, whereas the live action shows, I've put them as multiple seasons, like as you can see with the Mandalorian. That's because I feel, for the most part, with the animated shows, I can give them one solid rating, whereas in the case of the Mandalorian, it's there's a pretty huge gap between seasons, as you'll see later on in the tier list. I'm also going to try to do this roughly in release order, and we'll just kind of see how it goes, really. Before I do start with the first ranking, I just want to say that if you enjoy any form of Star Wars videos, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. The support means the world to me. Now I'm going to start with The Force Awakens, as obviously it feels like the best place to start when it comes to Disney Star Wars. And my opinion on this movie has changed a dozen times since it's released. I mean, you know, back in 2015 when it first came out, I was like everyone else, so excited that Star Wars had returned. All the promo, all the trailers leading up to it, and the community, you know, everyone was excited. There was barely any toxicity in the fandom at all. And when it came out, I must have watched it half a dozen times in cinema, I reckon, at least. And I still think it is a good movie. There's the obvious flaws of it's very similar to episode 4, very, very similar. And it doesn't really try do anything new at all. The characters it introduced as well. I mean, we got Rey, we got Finn, who all started off pretty solid. I thought Kylo was a great introduction. Snoke seemed mysterious. We got Han and Leia, and for the most part, I mean, they didn't really change too much about Leia. I still enjoyed Leia. I had my issues with Han, whereas I feel like they kind of just, I don't know, the entire character progression he went through it in the original trilogy, they basically just erased it. And he was back being a scoundrel. He was no longer with Leia. But I did like his death. I thought they'd done that very well. Obviously, I don't like how Luke was completely absent from the movie. I feel like that was a terrible idea, to be honest with you. But yeah, as the rest of the trilogies come out, it's gone a bit down in my ratings because, like I said, with Luke coming in at the end, it almost set up episode 8 and therefore 9 for a bit of failure. I feel like the groundworks from episode 7 weren't that solid, and like when you look at it as well, what I always liked about the prequels was how different the designs were, you know, all the planets, all the ships, all the characters, everything. Whereas, you know, episode 7 came out and we're back to just, you know, basically the same Star Destroyers and X-Wings and TIE Fighters and Rebels vs Empire pretty much again. And when I look at it that way, it really does take it down in my ratings. So I'm going to put that in C tier, towards the top of C tier, but definitely comfortably in C tier. I can't give that any higher. Next up, I'm going to go with Star Wars Rebels because I believe that was airing before Rogue One came out. And yeah, Rebels, to be honest with you, it has the high points of it are, you know, up there with some of the high points in the Clone Wars. I think season 1 lets it down a little bit, not massively to the point where it changes the ranking too much, but season 1 is a little bit too much of a children's show. Other than the final couple episodes, and I did like the Grand Inquisitor in the first season, but it really kicks into gear towards the end of the second season with Ahsoka and Vader. I feel like that was done pretty phenomenally, to be honest with you. It was great to have Ahsoka back. It was great to have Rex back. There were some really solid episodes in season 2. Obviously, we had Maul return, and then that all carried through into season 3, where we got Thrawn introduced into canon. And yeah, it's the same with season 4. It was nice to just have a kind of coherent villain being Thrawn, who wasn't actually you know, a dark side user with these magical powers, but he was just a smart, intelligent admiral. And yeah, I really enjoyed that, as it was different to pretty much anything we'd had before. Bringing Maul back was also a really good idea. Obviously, they brought him back with the Clone Wars, and then they brought him back in Rebels. But the conclusion of his character, you know, with Obi-Wan Kenobi, I feel like it was solid. I remember when I saw them two about to start their lightsaber fight back in the day, and when it first happened, I was a little bit disappointed that it was over in 5 seconds. But when I look back on it now, I feel like it was the best way to do it. Especially, you know, they were both aging, and it's just more of a battle of wits and intelligence, and it shows how much Obi-Wan had matured, and to an extent it showed how much Maul hadn't. But yeah, towards the final season also, I think everything that was great. The death of Kanan was really sad. I think that's one of the best deaths basically they've had since taking over. That's one of the ones they've handled the best. And I remember when I was watching the show, I also thought that, you know, they kind of had to kill off the whole cast, because where were they in the originals? But you know, we get their kind of epilogue at the end of the show, and I feel like it handled it really well. Obviously, a lot of it has led into the Ahsoka show, which I'll talk about later. But having Ezra kind of disappear in a random area of hyperspace, which we now know is a different galaxy, but I feel like that's an effective way to have removed him and Thrawn from affecting with original trilogy events. So yeah, I'm going to put this solidly in B tier. I don't think I can quite put it into A, looking at what I feel like I'm going to put in there later, but it's definitely better than C, and it's definitely towards the top end of B. Swiftly following that, we have Rogue One, which is one of my favourite things Disney have put out. I have such amazing memories of sitting in the cinema when Darth Vader turned on that lightsaber at the end and just tore through that corridor of just Rebels. Oh, it was amazing. I remember coming home and searching it up on YouTube so many times. The movies held up really well. It also obviously led to us having Andor, which I'll talk about. But I think I'm going to put Rogue One in A tier. But I think the only thing that kind of puts it down from having an S tier is when I've watched it back recently, I think the first act definitely drags a little bit. Once you get into that kind of end of the second half and the third act, you know, the movie picks up the pace and it is amazing. It's phenomenal. But the first act of the movie really lets it down. But I feel like the characters were all solid. A lot of them didn't get that much character development because it's hard to introduce like 8 new characters and give them an entire character arc in one movie. So obviously we got a lot more with Jin, Cassian, director Krennic really. But the supporting cast was all solid. It was a big move to just kill them all off. I couldn't believe they actually did it. But it was done well. It was done really well, to be honest. And it's just a really gritty war movie. I feel like they could have made it, you know, more of a war movie, if that makes sense. But what they did with it was fantastic. And I don't really have any bad words to say about it. So yeah, solidly an A tier. Not quite S, like I said, but solidly an A. Unlike, now moving on to episode 8. I watched it recently and it grew on me a little bit. It used to be my least favourite Star Wars movie. It isn't now. It's probably my second least favourite, but I have a little bit more of respect for it. I don't like the entire subplot in the movie, the Finn and Rose subplot, and all of the Canto Bight stuff. I feel like it was hard to watch. Also, how much they ruined Finn's character. Like, how amazing would have a stormtrooper turned into a Jedi leading the rebellion have been? And then they ended up just completely sidelining him. And then the big issue is Luke. And I'm not a huge fan of what they did with him, but I can understand it. But what I don't like about it is, as soon as he kind of redeemed himself or came back to the Rebels, he just died. And I feel like if you're gonna have him come back out of this island and his depression and whatnot, I just feel like they could have had him play a massive role in episode 9 and then maybe, you know, have him die halfway through or something like that. And like the way they killed him as well, I just think a Master Jedi dying from a power which basically, you know, a Jedi dying from just using the Force is, I think it's kind of stupid. I think the projection like ability is cool, but I feel like doing that shouldn't be so strenuous to kill you, especially someone like Luke Skywalker. I didn't like that at all. Yeah, I mean, what I can say about the movie is it's gorgeous. The movie is probably the best looking Star Wars movie. I think I can comfortably say that. And I like what they did with Kylo. Also, I feel like him killing Snoke, it was a good twist, but episode 9 kind of ruins that, because I feel like what we got having Snoke would have actually been better in episode 9, but I will talk about that in a minute with episode 9. But yeah, I'm gonna put it in C tier, towards the bottom of C tier. I think it's not a terrible movie, I just don't think it's a great Star Wars movie. Next up is Solo, which, to be honest with you, I think is criminally underrated. You know, it's not an amazing movie by all means, but it's definitely not bad. Definitely not as bad as Disney seemed to think it was. Obviously, with it not making millions of dollars in the box office. But like, I feel like B tier is perfect for Solo. I feel like the young versions of Han, Alden Ehrenreich and Donald Glover as Lando were perfect, especially Lando. You know, I'm really excited for this Lando movie they're going to do, which is written by Donald Glover. Hopefully that comes out one day, because I'll be there opening night for sure. But the plot for Solo's good. I enjoy the world building. I think when you look at it just as a, you know, maybe kind of how you look at like the Mandalorian season 1 as just a small kind of adventure in this big galaxy, and don't bring all this Rebels, Empire, Jedi, Sith stuff into it. It's a good movie. I enjoyed his backstory. At some points it did feel like they were just trying to throw, you know, Chewie, Lando, Kessel Run, all of this stuff we had learned about Han into one movie. But I still kind of enjoyed it. It was cool to see Kessel in live action, and the Pikes. The Darth Maul cameo made sense at the end. It was pretty cool. I kind of, you know, if it didn't flop as much as the box office as it did, which I think is Disney's fault, dropping it right after episode 8 and the same time as Infinity War, I feel like we would have got like a Crimson Dawn TV show or something like that, which maybe we'll get one day, but I don't know, it just seems like Disney aren't too I don't know, excited to touch anything to do with that movie for now, but we'll see. But yeah, just to clarify, I'm going to put that in a B tier. I'm also going to quickly place Resistance in this list, which I have actually watched, which I feel like most people haven't, because it's very clearly, well, it's actually not. I take that back. It's not clear. It looks like it's supposed to be a kid's show. It was very much on Disney XD, I believe. But it's also that weird line where it's like trying to be on the same sort of level as Clone Wars and Rebels, but it just is slightly too kiddie, I guess. Obviously, if you ask a child, I'm sure they might rank it a bit higher, but I'm just gonna, you know, leave it as D tier, bottom of the barrel. Like I said, it might not be actually the worst thing they've made, but for me, if I had to watch anything from this list, it's going to be the last thing I'd watch. But I will say one nice thing about it is I don't think the animation style is as bad as people say. I actually quite like it. It's a weird like anime kind of blend, but I do enjoy it. It's not as good as the Clone Wars style, but it's unique, and I give them props for trying something different. But yeah, that's enough about Resistance, because no one probably wants to hear me talk about that. It's in D tier. And following up in D tier, which it might be harsh, because I try not to be too negative about the big projects like this. You can maybe put it bottom of C tier, but something needs to be in D tier, so it is going to be The Rise of Skywalker. It's just a mess of a movie, really. Disney clearly saw that half the fan base wasn't a fan of The Last Jedi. They brought J.J. Abrams back and tried to fix it with The Rise of Skywalker, and I think they just made it worse. I think the main thing I hate about it is we had such a perfect ending at the end of Return of the Jedi, and then when you watch the ending in The Rise of Skywalker, it's like, I can't believe this is actually now the ending of the saga. Like, this is the last movie. Yeah, what to say about it? I like what they did with Kylo until they killed him. I think especially with this episode 10 or Rey movie coming out, I feel like having Ben Solo and that would have been so cool. Obviously not. I feel like they definitely could have done more with at the end of the movie where Rey hears the Jedi. They could have done so much more with that, and that goes throughout the entire sequels, other than the Yoda scene in The Last Jedi, which was good. I'll credit it that. They didn't really touch any of like the Force ghosts or stuff from the prequels or anything like that. I feel like having maybe like Anakin talk to Kylo Ren right before he turns to Ben would have been massive. That would have been an amazing scene. But yeah, once again they wasted Finn. Kind of wasted Poe, really. He just kind of was a bystander throughout the entire sequels. Palpatine coming back. I love Palpatine. He's one of my favourite characters, but bringing him back like that just discredits, I think, Episode 6 and, you know, Anakin's sacrifice and all Luke's efforts to bring him back to the light side, and I feel like it discredits it completely. But yeah, once again, it's a good looking movie, but I can't really say that many nice things about it, really, which is sad, but not you know, there's not much I can do about it. I can't pretend it's amazing. But yeah, like I said, bottom of the barrel D tier, I think, personally. But yeah, after that, we're moving into the sort of live action TV show era, if you will. No better place to start than season 1 of The Mandalorian, which I'm going to put in A tier. It's a shame that all the seasons of the TV shows aren't this quality, really. You know, it was a smaller story, which obviously led into bigger stuff with season 2 and season 3 later, but just as your bounty hunter smaller story goes, it was amazing. The tone was like perfect. The show looked decent as well. Like, it was clearly a TV show and wasn't a movie, but it looked a lot better than, you know, Kenobi did and Boba Fett did and stuff like that. But obviously it introduced Grogu, which is now a global phenomenon, really, but they managed to keep that under wraps. So they didn't even have any marketing for Grogu, which is insane, thinking about how much money he makes now. But yeah, I feel like the character progression we got throughout it, the supporting cast, the main story, the villain, everything, nailed it. I'm not putting it in S tier because I believe season 2 was better, which I'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, a pretty amazing season. I won't lie at all there. Following that up, I'm gonna talk about season 7 of the Clone Wars, as I believe that came out next. I haven't googled this. I'm just doing it purely off memory. But season 7 of the Clone Wars, S tier, straight S tier. The final arc alone is S tier. Obviously, I will address first the second arc with the Martez sisters, I believe their names were. I feel like was a wasted arc. I don't think it's not like terrible like people say, but with how good the Bad Batch arc was and the final arc and all the unreleased arcs we had, I feel like it was just a waste. But thankfully for the Clone Wars, the other 2 arcs in it were so good that I don't think it can take it out of S tier. The Bad Batch arc was a great introduction for the new show. It was also like, I feel like it was just a great way of, it was like fully in the Clone Wars. You know, we had all these different clones. We had Anakin, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan. It felt like a proper Clone Wars era story and battle, that it was nice that we got to see one like that one last time, obviously before the show ended. The animation was amazing, and it was even better in the final arc. I always kind of wish they released the Siege of Mandalore as a movie. I feel like it would have been a perfect way to tie up the show, but I don't know if it was ever in the plans, but the fact it released during COVID and lockdown definitely probably took it out of the window. But that final arc is, I don't think I've got one bad word to say about it. It's perfect. You know, the opening battle with the classic Star Wars music with Anakin and Obi-Wan and the 501st and on the bridge. Oh, it's amazing. And then it leads into everything with Ahsoka and Maul, and then we get Order 66. We see Rex's struggle, and then how they escape, and the aftermath with Vader picking up a lightsaber, and it's perfect. We get the amazing hallway scene with Maul, and I'm probably gonna go rewatch it after this, to be honest with you, because yeah, it is amazing. And I just wish everything Disney put out was of that quality, because we'd be laughing. Everything would be amazing, but obviously that's not the case. That's not how the world works. But going after that, I believe we're at season 2 of The Mandalorian, which I'm also going to put in S tier. Not as good as the Clone Wars, but S tier nevertheless. Other than one season, which I'll talk about in a minute, of a different TV show, I think season 2 of The Mandalorian is the best we've had. Every episode, other than, if I remember, the second episode with the spiders, was amazing. It was, from the introduction with Cobb Vanth teasing Boba Fett, was amazing. Then we had Ahsoka later in the season. Then we had Boba Fett actually return. We had the Dark Troopers. We had Gideon. We had Luke at the end. Just everything about season 2. It was a perfect story. I think Mando leaving Grogu at the end was heartbreaking, but it was done so well. And yeah, other than episode 2 being pretty much filler from what I remember, season 2 was amazing start to finish. I haven't watched it in a good few years. I don't think I've watched it since maybe just before the release of Book of Boba Fett. And I need to go back and rewatch it, because from what I remember, it's amazing. Following that, what I think the next thing is, from memory, like I said, once again, is the Book of Boba Fett. Which is an odd one to rank to me. I mean, it's just an odd show. I love Boba Fett, especially since they brought him back in season 2 of The Mandalorian. I thought he was amazing. And I am a fan to a certain extent of what they did with him in the show. I'm all for giving him more of a personality, and him maturing into like a crime lord and not just a strict cold-blooded bounty hunter. I don't mind that. I feel like it also wasn't done that badly. But the elephant in the room is he lost a major part of his show just because they gave an episode to The Mandalorian. And then this show kind of just, I don't know, it was a bit of a domino for season 3 of The Mandalorian not being as good, because Grogu was given straight back to Mando, and it kind of ruined the end of season 2 a little bit. But I did like the first few episodes with showing how he kind of came into power in the Jabba's palace, and the stuff with the Tusken Raiders I thought was all pretty good. It was cool to see stuff like the Sarlacc pit, Black Chrysanthemum. Seeing Luke it should have been in a different show, really, not really a thing to have in Book of Boba Fett, but that episode was really good. I know it's hard to talk about because it feels like it shouldn't have been in the show, but it was probably the best episode of the show. Everything there was great, really. I don't really have a bad word to say about actually anything in that episode. I also think the finale wasn't that bad either. It was cool to actually see, Boba Fett in combat, because I feel like we don't really see it that often, oddly, considering it's Boba Fett. Cad Bane, I feel like he was done pretty well. I see a lot of people complaining about him. But having his death at the hands of Boba seemed right. It wasn't like he was shown off to be weak or anything. He was just up against Boba Fett, who obviously, as we know, is a deadly bounty hunter, probably only second to his father. So yeah, it's hard to rank, like I said. Even though like I said, there's some good things in it, like I've just listed off. But it is still not amazing. I'm going to put it in C tier, towards the top of C tier, maybe just below episode 7. But yeah, it's a messy show. And then I think we're going to go to Bad Batch next. That sounds like season 1 of that might have been next. And the Bad Batch is a show where, just like Disney Star Wars, the highs of the Bad Batch they're spectacular, honestly. Some of the best animated stuff we've ever had with the Bad Batch. But the other end, not so much. But the reason why it isn't lower because of that is I feel the episodes that aren't amazing, they're not bad, they felt kind of pointless or filler. There's a load of episodes which I remember where it's just, oh, Bad Batch are talking to Sid, and then we need to go do a bounty, and then something goes wrong, and then Omega does something, but it all ends up okay in the end, and we go back to Sid, and we do that 10 times a season. But, like, throughout season 1 and 2, I remember the episodes we always got with Crosshair were amazing. It feels like, the premieres of the season, the mid-season finales, and the actual finales were always amazing. And the episode we got with Crosshair and Commander Cody was amazing, and the Crosshair on the I can't quite remember the name of it at the top of my head, but when he's on the snowy planet before he shoots the Imperial commander and basically defects was amazing. Season 3 was really good as well. Season 3 kind of got rid of a lot of the filler, I felt. Season 3 was a pretty coherent story, and it was probably the best out of the 3, I'd say. I mean, I haven't watched all 3 of them through since it's done, but from memory, season 3 didn't have that much filler. And we got, obviously, we got Ventress, which was cool. We had Tech die in the end of season 2, which was really sad, and obviously everyone wanted him back in season 3. And we never got that, which was a good thing, I think. I think bringing some characters back is good, like the cases of Maul. But not everyone needs to come back, and the show did need to have some stakes, and Tech dying was that. And then in the finale, I thought someone else was going to die. I thought they should have done. But then with how it ended in the finale, I feel like it all tied up pretty well. Seeing the flash forward with Omega going away was really nice to see with an old hunter, knowing that they, after the war and surviving the Imperial era, they all just got to like settle down basically and live an old man life like they deserve. So yeah, I thought they wrapped up pretty much everything there. All the loose ends were pretty much tied up, especially with, obviously we had the Project Necromancer stuff, which we find out the reason why that's so delayed and ends up not happening until the sequels is because Mount Tantus basically blows up and we lose all of it. So yeah, pretty solid. Gonna give it middle of the road B tier, pretty much similar to Rebels is what I'm gonna go with. No, not the Clone Wars, not as good as the Clone Wars, but about as good as Rebels, maybe better. Next, I know they obviously Tales of the Empire came out just this year, but I'm going to talk about both of the Tales series. I'll do Tales of the Empire first because it's my least favourite out of the two. I feel like the stories we got were, I don't know, Morgan Elsbeth didn't seem necessary. The first episode, seeing the how the massacre on Dathomir affected her was interesting, was good. But I feel like, I don't know, it just wasn't all necessary. We didn't need to see it all. I feel like we didn't learn that much more about her character that we didn't already know from the show. And then the Barriss stuff was necessary, but I wasn't a huge fan of what they did with her. It was cool to see the Inquisitorius, but I feel like they just used Vader to kind of bait people into watching the season. We only saw him in one scene. We didn't get to see him interact with Barriss at all. I think Vader killing Barriss would have been a perfect way for her character. But obviously they chose to redeem Barriss, which I don't think is a terrible thing to do. But then they did what they seem to be doing in pretty much every show. You know, at the end she got stabbed by a lightsaber wound in the chest with what it looks like no medical attention, but it also looks like she's going to survive. So yeah, Tales of the Empire was a massive downgrade on Tales of the Jedi for me. I still want to see them do more of the Tales series, but I feel like Tales of the Empire wasn't as necessary. So I'm going to put it in C tier, personally. Tales of the Jedi, on the other hand, definitely A tier. And obviously, two halves, two separate characters. The Ahsoka stuff, I don't think was necessary either, but it was done well. Minus the first episode, which just seemed a bit pointless, of her as a little baby, basically. But yeah, her other two episodes showing how she survived the early days of the Empire and what Anakin taught her, which then allowed us to survive Order 66, was very poetic considering Anakin caused Order 66. But what I want to talk about mainly here is the Count Dooku episodes were amazing. I've always wanted to get some stuff with younger Count Dooku, and I love the era that's like 20, 30 years before the Phantom Menace. You know, when you've got Palpatine and Plagueis, you know, running around, you've got Qui-Gon, you've got like a younger Mace, you've got Dooku in the Order, Jedi Master Cypher Dyas, all of those characters in that era, you know, like a young Obi-Wan Kenobi. I always want to see more stories of that, and I'm so glad we finally got it. And I feel like they showed his fall to the dark side amazingly. They showed how he was, you know, distrustful of the Senate, and thought the Senate was corrupt and didn't like how they got involved with the Jedi. Similar to how Qui-Gon felt, but to a bit more of an extreme, which is why I always feel like if Qui-Gon survived, he may have followed Count Dooku even, maybe not to the Sith, but leaving the Order at least. You can see where Jedi's version of Dooku and Qui-Gon are very similar, obviously, because Master and Apprentice. You can see, obviously, in the third episode, how the death of Qui-Gon and the distrust of the Jedi, etc., leads him to Sidious. And we see how he removes Kamino from the data banks, and then obviously fights Yaddle, and Sidious is watching, and it's a great duel. It was cool to see Yaddle, but it was also cool to finally see how she died, and I think it was a perfect way to show Dooku's turn. I'm going to put it in A tier. At the bottom of A tier, below Rogue One and Mandalorian, but definitely solidly in A tier. Also, the animation, and same for Tales of the Empire, was beautiful. It was just that Clone Wars animation, but they've just improved it so much over the years, and yeah, it's spectacular in these shows. Up next, I believe, is Kenobi, or Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is a hard one because I've tried so much to love this show. I really have. As time's gone on, I've put it down in my rankings a bit, but the main reason I put Kenobi down, well, there's two main reasons. The first one is half the story of basically Reva. I feel like, no hate to the actress or anything like that at all, I just feel like it wasn't necessary in a Kenobi show. I'm not going to go into it much, but I just feel like with a show where you've got Hayden Christensen and Obi-Wan and Ewan McGregor, back, you do not need to waste half a show on introducing a new Inquisitor. You could just have it about those two, and it would be amazing. And the stuff that we do get when it's just Obi-Wan and Vader is amazing. I love the flashback with Anakin. I feel like it perfectly paralleled episode 5. I felt episode 5 and episode 6 were solid. You know, the final episodes where we got to see them have their duel, which I thought it was a solid duel. I feel like if Obi-Wan versus Anakin in episode 3 wasn't so good, it would look a bit better. But I feel like the budget really showed. A lot of the sets just looked, or volume I guess, were just like random, just plain valleys, or just a cave, or even where they had their final battle it was just a rocky surface. Yeah, the show looked cheap, and it was only 6 episodes long for some reason, which is insane. Like, why you would not have more episodes, a higher budget, so it could look like how Andor looked, is ridiculous to me. But yeah, some of the stuff in it was really good. I feel like episode 3, episode 5, and episode 6 were solid, but then the other half of the show, being episodes 1, 2, and 4, not so much. It had some really goofy stuff in there, like the Leia chase scene, or Obi-Wan trying to hide Leia in his jacket, or Reva somehow surviving her second lightsaber stab to the chest. Yeah, a lot of stuff they could have done better, but there was a lot of stuff I enjoyed, so I'm going to put it bang in the middle of C tier. Not a great show, not a bad show, just somewhere in the middle. Next, I'm going to talk about Andor, which is just as probably everyone knows, it's pretty universally agreed, Andor is amazing. Straight into S tier, I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all. It looks amazing. It's the only show Disney have put out with where I actually remember the music from the show. Like, Disney have had an issue, and I don't know if it's a budget thing or losing John Williams or whatnot, but the original 6 Star Wars movies, and even the sequels to an extent, you can always just remember the themes or the battle music or anything like that. It's so iconic. It's almost as important as what happens on screen. And other than, the Mandalorian's main theme, I don't get that with any of the Star Wars shows other than Andor. I just think, the music was amazing, the characters were amazing, you actually care about what's going on. The way it's formatted with 4 different arcs, and it shows, the dark side of not the dark side, but the early stages, the rough stages of the rebellion, and you get to see how scary the Empire is. I love the scene where the TIE fighter goes by before they're preparing the heist, and any other show or movie, one TIE fighter, no one cares, it's not a threat. But in this it is. And I couldn't say enough good things about Andor. Luthen is amazing. I love every single scene with him in. Andor has some of the best dialogue. You get 2 amazing speeches in one episode, one from Luthen, one from Kino, I believe his name is, on the prison. And I don't think I could come up with a single bad thing to say about Andor. I'm so excited for season 2. I cannot wait for season 2. It's going to be amazing. And like I said, not a single bad word to say. It's going to be an S tier, above Mandalorian season 2. And then depending on what day you're asking me, it's going to swap between the Clone Wars and Andor. But I'm going to keep the Clone Wars at the top and put Andor in second. Now, just a few more seasons to talk about, really. I'm going to go with Mandalorian season 3 first, which is at the bottom of C tier. It's just a nothing show to me. Everything that happens in it, just I don't really care about. The Gideon stuff was pointless. There was no change between Mandalorian and Grogu because all of that happened in the Book of Boba Fett. The show looked cheap. So much of it was just filler. We had that terrible Jack Black and Lizzo episode. I do struggle to say anything good about season 3 of The Mandalorian, to be honest with you. It just felt so far away from season 1 and 2, and this mighty reclamation of Mandalore that we were promised just felt, I don't know, boring. Like, I don't know if I want to call it boring, but I think I am going to. The show just lacked all substance, and I'm going to rewatch it, and I might do an actual full-length video purely on season 3 of The Mandalorian if I feel like it. But just felt like a nothing show to me. It wasn't inherently terrible, but it definitely wasn't good. So bottom of C tier. Definitely. Next up I have Ahsoka, which has changed a little bit since it came out. If you asked me right after the show aired, I probably would have put it in A tier. But I think now I'm going to put it at the top of B tier. There was a lot of stuff I liked in Ahsoka. Baylan Skoll and Shin were amazing new characters. Obviously, rest in peace to Ray Stevenson. But they were some of the best villains we've had introduced in a long time. They were performed perfectly as well. I feel like the World Between Worlds episode we got with Anakin and young Ahsoka was spectacular. Probably my favourite episode of a Star Wars TV show we've had. Everything about that was amazing. Ezra was really good. I think I actually preferred Ezra in this than I did in Star Wars Rebels, which was something. It was nice to see, stuff like the New Republic, which we haven't really seen a whole lot of. It was amazing to see Thrawn in live action and some Night Sisters. I felt that this was the first show that got lightsaber battles right. Anakin versus Ahsoka and Ahsoka versus Baylan Skoll were both amazing. A few things that obviously I didn't like about the show. Some of it looked really cheap. which obviously is an issue all the shows are having. I feel like the ending let the show down a little bit. The ending wasn't bad, but I feel like it could have been better. I don't mean like the final scene. Obviously, the final scene with Ahsoka seeing Anakin as a Force ghost is great. I mean, like, as well as Baylan obviously standing on that statue of the mother, or the father, sorry, with the mother, not the mother, the father with the brother and the daughter, was amazing. Those statues were so cool, and I love the teasers we're getting towards the mother. Get that right this time. Hopefully that we'll get in a season 2, because that would just be fantastic to see, especially in live action. I mean, I feel like it would look better in animation, but it would just be a sight to behold really in live action. It's something that's so deep in the lore that would actually get shown in live action would be crazy really to see, but I'm definitely all for it. Sabine was also a tough one to think about in this. I feel like there's nothing wrong with her being a Jedi, but I just don't think they did it particularly well in this. I feel like it seemed that she went from not really knowing how to use the Force at all to being able to do this massive jump and push. I feel like they could have, stretched it more throughout the season. Obviously had not really know how to use it at the start. As it went on, actually being able to see her progress would have been nicer than just one big moment. But I love what the show's setting up for season 2, and I'm very excited for all of it. So yeah, I'm going to put it top of B tier, not quite A, but definitely B tier. And finally, if I don't believe I've missed anything, I'll leave a comment if I do, or if I did, sorry. But last up is the Acolyte, which I've done my full review, so I won't talk about it loads. If you want to see my full review of the Acolyte, check it out on my channel. I did the good, the bad, and the ugly review of the Acolyte, which covers all of the points that I could possibly talk about in the show, really. So I'm just going to not mess around, put it in C tier. I'm going to say not the worst season of live action stars we've had. That'll go to the Mandalorian. I don't know whether I'd put it above Boba Fett. I'm probably going to put it on kind of similar playing fields. There was things I liked. I liked Soul. I liked Khmer. I liked the lightsaber fights. But there was a lot I didn't like. I didn't like the witches. I didn't like May. Venestra was not. I wasn't a huge fan of her either. There was so much like avoidance of not telling the council. And the runtime and the episode lengths, a lot of it fell flat to me. But like I said, check out my full review if you want to see me talk more about the Acolyte. I'm going to put it in the middle of C tier to end off this tier list. But yeah, that is my full Star Wars Disney era review. I thought I didn't want to include the pre-George Lucas stuff because my views on that obviously is I love all of it, but then that includes 6 more seasons of the Clone Wars and 6 more movies, and if I want to talk about that as a whole, I'd like to do that in a separate video almost. But yeah, as I said, full Disney Star Wars tier list right here. Obviously this is my opinion, this is not a definitive tier list. If you love the Rise of Skywalker or season 3 of the Mandalorian or the Acolyte, that is amazing, that is great for you. You do that and you tell people about that. And if you hate Andor or the Clone Wars somehow, that's completely fine. But if you do have different opinions to me, be sure to put them down in the comments. If you want to discuss anything, I always reply to every comment pretty much. If you do find yourself debating with people in the comments or anywhere on social media, just remember to be polite, be respectful. Less toxicity in the fandom would be nice. But if you did enjoy this or any other long form or short form Star Wars content, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. May the Force be with you, always.